In my fantasy football league last year, the team that won it wasn't the team that had the best draft. The team that won it actually made the best trade. The team that lost it didn't have the worst draft. They just made the worst trade. This is truly the most important thing you can do in fantasy football. Understanding the correct trade strategy, making sure that you're not going to lose your league because of an idiotic move. And it's not just how you evaluate players, it's how you construct deals overall. So I'm going to talk about 7 different principles that will make you a better fantasy football trader today, starting with understanding how to value players that are the elite cornerstone chips, that are the middling starters, that are the flex starters versus those bench pieces. Now, people really don't have a good grasp on how to value the Bijan Robinsons of the world when you're looking at Travis Etienne instead. They kind of think like, oh, Bijan Robinson's the RB1, Travis Etienne's like the RB18, so it's going to be a linear chart down, but that's not the case at all. The value gap that you have from the RB1 in fantasy to the RB6 in fantasy, that value gap is larger than the gap between RB6 and RB30. It's not linear. It is actually a negative exponential curve on how you should evaluate these players. I'll show you the trade calculator that the developers on flockfantasy.com spent months building to perfect this formula. And of course, we're giving it to you as well near the end of this. But first, let me at least prove this with math. Let's look at fantasy football points per game last season. The QB1 to the QB5, that delta in points per game was 4.3 points. And as you go down and look at worse and worse options, it's really flat. QB5 to QB10, that difference is 2.3 points. QB10 to QB15, that difference is only 1.9 points. So you can see the biggest gaps in points per game are truly the elite names at the top to the middling other RB1s or the middling QB1s. See this with the same thing at running backs. The RB1 to the RB6, that delta was 4.6 points. RB6 to RB12 was only 1.1. That's a 4x difference. And wide receiver, this is going to be the most pronounced. Wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 6 last year, that was a 5.2 points per game difference. Wide receiver 6 to wide receiver 12, that was only 1.8 points. Wide receiver 12 to wide receiver 18, that flattened out to 1.4. Wide receiver 18 to wide receiver 24, that flattened out to 1. And wide receiver 24 to wide receiver 30 was only a 0.3 point per game difference. So when I'm looking at wide receivers in trades and I see on this site, oh, this player's wide receiver 24 in my rankings versus wide receiver 30, typically I say, oh, that's meaningless. That's going to be your personal preference because the actual point per game drop off is going to be nothing. So I want you to understand, if you have Puka Nacua, if you have Bijan Robinson, I would have included CeeDee Lamb on this list if he wasn't about to hit the IR. If you have one of those blue chip players, you hold on to them, and if you get the opportunity to trade for them, you go for it and you do not hesitate. You can quote unquote overpay, you can quote unquote lose the deal. It doesn't matter. If you have McCaffrey and Puka Nacua on the same team, you are winning this year. Now let's look over and let's look at the actual trade strategy that's specific to your team. And that's going to be your current record. If you're a 3-0 team, like I honestly may be in the Flock League by the time you're watching this video, last undefeated team, obviously a team of destiny, but I'm 3-0, right? So when I'm valuing these players in trades, I'm not thinking about what they're going to do in week 4. I'm not really thinking about what they're going to do in week 5. I'm thinking about their long-term upside. So if I'm a 3-0 team, what kind of players am I looking at? Oh, I'm going to be trying to go trade for TreVeyon Henderson, where it's like, yeah, I'm not that excited to start TreVeyon Henderson in week 4. But by the time we get to week 12, would I be that surprised if TreVeyon Henderson's a top 10 running back? Not at all. I'm going to be going and looking to trade for Rashee Rice. Now, of course, I'm not going to have Rice for a couple more weeks, but by the time we get to week 12, Rashee Rice could be a wide receiver 1 in my rankings. And honestly, maybe if you get a good enough discount, trades I saw today in the live stream, there wasn't a big enough discount, but if you could go get CeeDee Lamb at a nice cost, then hell yeah, I'll trade Drake London and a crap player for CeeDee Lamb, because the 0-3 teams, the 1-2 teams, they have the exact opposite mentality. If you are 0-3 right now and you're watching this video, what you need to be doing, if you have TreVeyon Henderson on your bench, if you have Rashee Rice on your bench, if you have George Kittle on your bench, you need to be willing to accept a loss to trade them. You can't be thinking long-term. It doesn't matter if Trevion Henderson is the RB1 overall in fantasy from week 12 onwards if you got bounced from playoff contention by the time you got to week 8. You would be better off to go through and, if you're 0-3, sell Kittle, sell Henderson, sell Rice, sell Lamb, sell them at a discount. Get somebody in your starting lineup today that is going to help you start putting points up on the board, because you cannot afford to fall to 0-4. You cannot afford to fall to 0-5. You at 0-5, you're done. Don't even bother submitting your starting lineup rest of season. Now, the other thing that I want you to be looking at is, in general, when we're making 2-for-1 deals, when we're making 1-for-2 deals, you need to understand, should you be tiering up or should you be tiering down? And if you're going to be tiering up, what you need to do is look at the value on your bench. If you have more than 2 solid bench options, or honestly, if you have more than 1 solid bench option, I would say you could afford to make a trade and get a better player in your starting lineup. So if you maybe just got Cam Scatterbo all of a sudden looking like a must-start running back, Trey Benson as a must-start running back, and you already had Ricky Pearsall on your bench, you're like, you know what? God, I have Benson, I have Scat, and I have Pearsall on my bench, but you're sitting with a mediocre tight end like TJ Hawkinson. You know what you should look to do at that point? You should look to try to sell one of those bench names with TJ Hawkinson to get an upgrade inside the starting lineup. Now, if your league mates aren't interested in those bench names, it's very likely they won't be. What you can also look to do is look at the players that are in your flex, because if you have flex worthy options on your bench, maybe if you're sitting with Marvin Harrison in your flex, you could afford to go through and try to sell Marvin Harrison and TJ Hawkinson and go get Tyler Warren, if it means all of a sudden you're just going to slide Trey Benson into your flex spot anyway, and there's not a massive fall off. Now, on the flip side of this, if you just had a significant injury to CeeDee Lamb, because I know I actually looked at some teams in the live stream yesterday that had both CeeDee Lamb and James Conner on them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what the hell are you doing here? What are you going to put in the starting lineup this next week? Are you telling me you're going to have to go out there and start Trey Tucker? If you don't have a player coming back to fill that starting lineup soon with an injury, or in general, if you just have disgusting options in your starting lineup and you don't have any bye weeks you're dealing with at the moment, it is only going to get worse when we get to the byes. So if you just lost like CeeDee Lamb and you lost James Conner, and you are also sitting there with Bucky Irving as your running back, you may be forced to be in a position where you actually have to make a tier down, where you may have to sell Bucky Irving and in return get back like Travis Etienne and Ladd McConkey. But of course, it's going to be very dependent on your specific team. The other thing that's going to be very specific to your league is going to be the replacement level player. This is an extremely important concept to understand, because when we construct these deals, where it's a 2-for-1 deal, it's a 3-for-1 deal, it's a 1-for-2 deal, you need to look at how important depth is in your league. The easiest way to do this is by understanding the best waiver wire option at all times. Because if you trade 2 players for 1, you're able to go pick up that name off the waiver wire. Whereas if you trade 1 player for 2, you're going to have to drop the worst option on your bench. So we can go through and we can look at the difference between a replacement level player. Now, all these teams that I'm looking at were submitted to me on flockfantasy.com. We're live streaming, answering questions every single day. I'm live streaming, looking at your fantasy football teams every single day. So just make sure you're subscribed, and I'd be super happy to take a look at your team in one of those streams. But all these teams, you can see the difference. Here's a 10-team league with shallow benches. The replacement level players out there, you have Jordan Addison on the waiver wire. You have Keon Coleman on the waiver wire, Rashad White, Hunter Henry. A 10-team league with deep benches, maybe the best options are Hunter Henry, Darnell Mooney, Tyler Algier. A 12-team league with really good players that know what they're doing, maybe the best options you have on waivers are like Trey Tucker, Jeremy McNichols, Kyle Monangai, CJ Stroud, like absolute garbage. And then, of course, in a 14-team league, we know the replacement level players on the waiver wire are going to be bad as well. We're really at the very best, you could just be picking up handcuff style running backs. And this concept of the replacement level player is going to be incredibly important to roll into the next tool that we have on flockfantasy.com. And I'll say real quick, it's completely free to link your team with flockfantasy.com. At all times, see those best options on the waiver wire. It's just the far right column on the My Teams page after you link your team. You can link with ESPN, you can link with Sleeper, and you can link with Yahoo. You can go ahead and use the trade calculator no matter what platform you're playing on. And what you really need to do with the trade calculator is look at the replacement level player and add it to the side that is missing an empty slot. So like, here's a hypothetical trade that I'm throwing in the trade calculator, right? This is Ricky Pearsall and T. Higgins, and I receive Rome Odunze. Now, the trade calculator is going to say maybe you slightly lose this deal, but we can take it one step further and we can go through and we can use those scenarios of what does a replacement level player in your league look like? Like in the Flock League, replacement level player, the best name on the waiver wire right now is maybe Trey Tucker. So it'd really be like you're selling Ricky Pearsall, T. Higgins to get Rome Odunze, and then you're going to pick up Trey Tucker for free. You throw that in the trade calculator. The trade calculator is actually going to say it's a fair deal. But going back to that shallower format, if you go out there and you trade Ricky Pearsall, T. Higgins for Rome Odunze, and you add Jordan Addison as the player you're picking up off the waiver wire, all of a sudden it flips from a trade that you were maybe slightly losing to a trade that you are straight up winning. And again, I do want to reiterate, for the love of God, before you ever make a fantasy football trade or even before you make an offer, please at least run it by the trade calculator on flockfantasy.com. I promise you, I do this with legitimately every single trade that I potentially make. If y'all saw that video of me making a Drake London trade in the Flock League before the season even started, I was using the trade calculator because it genuinely is the best trade calculator you are possibly going to find at understanding exactly how you should value the Puka Nacua versus Rome Odunze versus T. Higgins. Like, it knows that tier drop off and it doesn't just treat it as if it's a linear fall. So definitely use the trade calculator on the site. For the love of God, it's completely free. The trade finder is completely free as well. And this is something that you can use to get an idea, right? So say you're sitting here and you're going, crap, I just lost CeeDee Lamb. I'm 0-3 at the same time. Mason says, if I'm 0-3 and I just lost Lamb, I can't wait for the long-term value. I need to sell him right now. What could I actually get? You can just go put CeeDee Lamb on the trade finder and see a bunch of real fantasy football trades from real leagues that got processed today and have a general gauge of the asking price. Just looking at the trade calculator and trying to evaluate some of these deals to give you a quick little insight of what side I would want on each one of these. Somebody traded Jacoby Myers and J.K. Dobbins for Rome Odunze. If I was going to make a deal like this to upgrade to Rome, I think it makes a lot of sense if J.K. Dobbins was currently a bench player for you and maybe you had Tyrone Tracy break out, maybe you had Cam Scatterbo break out, and all of a sudden you no longer needed J.K. Dobbins, so you could get the up tier with Rome. And then on the flip side of that, maybe if you had Rome Odunze and your two running backs were, I don't know, maybe you were starting Chase Brown and James Conner every single week. Chase Brown looks like dust. James Conner's gone. Then I could understand you wanting to sell Rome for Jacoby and Dobbins. Next deal, somebody traded Ricky Pearsall for Devonta Smith, Trey Benson. They clearly did not check the trade calculator. You throw that in the trade calculator, it's going to say the Trey Benson and Devonta Smith side is robbing the Pearsall side. And then going through and looking at this next deal. This is Cam Scatterbo, Quinshon Judkins, Jamison Williams, Quentin Johnston for Trey Benson and Malik Neighbors. This is an example of a trade that we go through and we use all the time. Because you are essentially just taking 4 quarters here and you are turning them into $1 with Malik Neighbors. And again, this is what a lot of trade calculators don't understand. Maybe they would say that this is a fair deal and you potentially want the package, but the reality is the Malik Neighbors side is clearly the winning side here, knowing that you just get to pick up 2 players off the waiver wire and you have the blue chip cornerstone asset at the same time. So please make sure that you take the asset with the best deal in this instance. Somebody traded Olave and Byshell Tootin for Marv. I would view this and go, you know what, Marv, Olave, kind of the same here. It's just going to be up to your personal preference. Somebody traded Amari Hampton and Teteroa McMillan for Christian McCaffrey. Again, look at my rankings. I have Amari Hampton as a low-end RB1 rest of season. I have Tet McMillan as a low-end wide receiver 1 rest of season. But frankly, it does not matter. Throw it in the trade calculator. McCaffrey is going to run away with this just because, hell, he is the best asset in fantasy football, and that's how those assets should be treated. Somebody traded Lamb and Romeo Doubs for Malik Neighbors. If you're 0-3, if you're 1-2, go make that trade right now. Go get Neighbors. Somebody traded Terry and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt for Igbuka. If JCM was like your 5th running back and you wanted the wide receiver upgrade, go for it. But overall, I really hope that I was able to help you out with your trades going into the future. Obviously, I'm answering trade questions in the live stream every single night. Most of the questions we're answering are free as well. We just give them out to the people in the stream. So just make sure you subscribe to the channel. Come by a live stream. I'd be super happy to answer your questions. And on top of that, All these tools we're building for you on flockfantasy.com. So many of them are free. Link your team for free. See the best waiver wire options. Use the trade calculator for free. It's the best trade calculator in the industry, and it's not even remotely close. Use the trade finder for free as well. But I think that's all I got for you. I really appreciate you, and I really hope I get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.